Hello students, this is your English mentor Miss Marman. Today we will discuss from the second unit, that is modern living, and the subtopics are advisory text, modal verbs, imperative verbs, sustained metaphor, run-on lines, occasional rhymes, and binomial pairs. So let us now look into what advisory text is all about. Firstly, what is an advice? Advice means an opinion or recommendation offered as a guide to action, conduct, etc., and what people should do in a particular situation. Likewise, advisory text is also about containing advice, especially a warning, and it should be clearly expressed. It contains true facts but a friendly one. Advisory text encourages and motivates the audience. It also offers choices. While writing an advisory text, remember to make good use of modal verbs and imperative verbs. Modal verbs are special verbs and can be followed directly by the main verbs. Modal verbs are also called auxiliary verbs. They give additional information about the functions of the main verb. Some examples of modal verbs are can, could, may, should, must, have to, might, etc. Now, imperative verbs, also known as bossy verbs, are verbs that creates imperative sentence. When reading, the speaker always sound like bossing someone around. It does not indicate a subject, for example, I, you, they, etc., but always starts with the base form of a verb. For example, if you are giving a command or an order and you say jump into the pool, here jump is the base form of the verb followed by a command. For better understanding of what imperative verbs are, let us now watch a short clip. You got a clearer picture of what imperative verbs are. Now, let us learn about creating and writing an advisory text. First, always choose an attention-grabbing title. Secondly, the opening paragraph should motivate the readers or the audience to keep on reading. Thirdly, the main body offers several pieces of advice in a clear and logical way. Try to include your advices in bullet points, give a heading and a subheading. Make it into short paragraphs with supportive evidence. Fourthly, the concluding paragraph should summarize the advice offered and encourage the readers to take actions. For example of an advisory text, you can refer to page number 20 of your textbook. Let us now look into what sustained metaphor is all about. As you all know that a metaphor is a comparison between two unlike things. So, a sustained metaphor, also known as extended metaphor, is when an author uses a metaphor throughout a long passage or even an entire poem. When we write, a sustained metaphor is used to create clearer comparison between two things. An example of sustained metaphor poem is from the book, which is in page number 25. The Planners, written by Bowie Kim Cheng. It is a 3-stanza poem, and the poet uses many techniques such as sustained metaphor and personification. It is a free verse poem, so it has no rhyme or meter, which means that the beats or the rhythm differ from line to line. In the first stanza of the poem, the poet states what the planners do. They plan, they build, all spaces are gridded. It also shows how organized the planners are. The fact that the pronoun they is used instead of directly naming the planners makes them seem ominous and mysterious. The planners are dehumanized, the sea and the skies are personified, they are drawing back and surrendering. Shows that the planners have driven nature out of the city. In the second stanza, the poet shows that modernization is destructive through the use of sustained metaphor. Sustained metaphor is introduced which lasts throughout the entire stanzas. The sustained metaphor equates the planners to dentists. The idea of going to the dentist is one that many people find unpleasant. This is the reason why the poet uses metaphor. Dental dexterity is usually very precise, which shows that everything in the city is planned and can be manipulated. The lines, all gaps are plugged with gleaming gold, extends the metaphor of dentistry. Since the gaps are like holes in the teeth and the gleaming gold is a filling. The gold may also represent money, so this shows that everything is being transformed into something luxurious. The perfect rows of shining teeth represents building or the modern buildings which have replaced the old and more historic buildings. In the final stanza, the poet says that he actually wants to preserve the blueprints that the planners are using to plan the city, which shows that the poet may actually support the modernization that they are carrying out. It looks like the poet has been brainwashed by the planners into being on their side. It also looks like he is being ironic and sarcastic, where he says he's not going to bother to bleed poetry to stain the blueprint of past tomorrow, since he is doing exactly that in the poem, and all this progress will never inspire him to write any poetry. Now, what are run-on lines in poetry? It is a term used to refer to lines that end without a punctuation mark and without completing a sentence. It does not come to an end but moves over to the next line. For example, in the poem The Planners, run-on lines can be found in the first stanza of the third line, that is, the buildings are in alignment with the roads, which meet at desired points, linked by bridges, all hang in the grace of mathematics. So these are called run-on lines in poetry. Next is occasional rhymes. I have already mentioned in the beginning that the poem is a free verse poem with no rhymes and meter and occurs unpredictably. The beats and the rhythm differ from line to line. You can refer the poem for the example: gridded, possibilities, roads, points, hang, mathematics, stop, back, surrender. These are all unrhymed words and are also called occasional rhymes. Lastly, let's look into binomial pairs. Binomial pairs is an extreme form of collocation. Words joined by a conjunction. Some of the most common binomial pairs are binomial pairs joined by and. Second, binomial pairs joined by the word or. Third, binomial pairs with alliteration. Fourth, binomial pairs joined by other words. Fifth is rhyming binomial pairs. For more binomial examples, let us look or watch a short video from English with Pretty channel.
we're going to talk about binomial pairs. If you're wondering what the heck are binomial pairs, well, I've got you covered. That's a really good question. These are phrases that contain two words that are connected by a conjunction, and that conjunction is either and or, and these phrases are called binomial pairs. Native speakers use them all the time. You can use them in formal conversations if you're giving a presentation, and you can also use them informally if you're just talking to someone on the street. Well, I'm going to teach you some common expressions. I will tell you the meaning, give you some examples, so that way you can see how they are used in context. That's the first expression is bits and pieces. Bits and pieces. And this just means an assortment of small things. For example, maybe you drop a cup on the floor and you say, wow, it shattered into bits and pieces. Or you're talking about somebody giving you information. They don't really tell you everything, they give you a little bit at a time, and you say, they told us the truth in bits and pieces.
What?
No, I'm only picking up bits and pieces, of course.
Next, wine and dine. Wine and dine. And this binomial pair means to take somebody out and really entertain them. And usually you would entertain them with fine dining, maybe a fancy restaurant, so that's wine and dine. Often it's associated with a restaurant and you're eating somewhere. It doesn't mean that you have to be drinking wine, so keep that in mind.
Besides, being wined and dined by a rich guy might be nice.
The next binomial pair is safe and sound. Safe and sound. This just means that there is nothing to worry about. You're free from harm and injury. And often you would use it to describe a situation and say that you're safe and sound or everyone is safe and sound. Perhaps there was a natural disaster and you're okay and you're letting somebody know and you're like, hey, I'm safe and sound, don't worry about me, I'm free from danger. If you want to study English with me, you're safe and sound, there's nothing to worry about. You're not gonna get hurt watching my lessons. I don't know why you would.
Just come back safe and sound.
Next, sooner or later. Sooner or later. This is an expression that means that something will happen. It's definitely going to happen. We just don't know when it's going to happen. It may happen sooner, it may happen later. So if you're describing something, like, I'll do that, I'll do it sooner or later. Well, if you keep watching my videos, I promise you sooner or later, you will achieve fluency. That's for sure.
Everything could change for me. Sooner or later, gonna have to fight him.
Well, we reached the end of this video. Hopefully you learned something from it and you found it useful.
Well, with this we have reached the end of our lesson. I hope you find these tips helpful. Thank you and take care.